All right. So again, welcome everyone. We're so glad that you've taken some of your time today to be with us. My name is Aurelis Cortez, and I am the event coordinator here at Turning Point Breast Cancer Rehabilitation. Today's event, The Anxious Mind, as I mentioned earlier, will be recorded. So we will be sharing it on our YouTube channel and on our Facebook page. This is an interactive event, so we ask that if you have any questions, please feel free to ask them on our Q&A box. For most people, it will be on the bottom of your device, and we will get to as many questions as possible. So please feel free to ask. You can ask anonymously if you wish to as well. Briefly, Turning Point is a 501c3 nonprofit. We are always wanting to give a shout out to our socially responsible partners that you see here on our screen. These are just some of them. These are businesses, and there's a lot of individual donors that are not mentioned here, but they allow us to bring these events to you free of charge. And as a nonprofit, we are always grateful for the support of the community, businesses, companies, and individual donors. And if you wish to donate, if you appreciate today's event and wish to donate, you can do so at myturningpoint.org. So thank you guys again for being here. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Naynette.
All right. Well, good morning, afternoon, everyone. There we go. Let me go back to the beginning. All right. So as Aurelis said, I am Dr. Naynette Kennett, and I am the counselor, the therapist at Turning Point. So welcome, everyone. We're talking about the anxious mind. What is it? How to overcome fears and anxieties about your diagnosis, about life, about everything. So hopefully after today, you will be able to understand what anxiety is, what fear is, and how it shows up in your everyday life. But more importantly, how to overcome it. So welcome, everyone. I can't see, I'll say it every time I have these presentations. I can't see you, but hey and welcome. At least I was able to see right now there, see how many are here. So today you'll get information again. What is anxiety? What is fear? How does it show up, or what does anxiety look like for breast cancer survivors? What is the anxious mind? Why is that even important? And how to transform the anxious mind. So once we find out what it is, now how do we go from anxious to normal anxiety? Because I want you to know, if you take away anything, anxiety in itself is not abnormal. It's when it's distressing or cause significant problems. So the goal is not to eliminate your anxiety completely, but to have it so that you can manage it. All right. All right. So what does anxiety look like for breast cancer survivors? So it's, first of all, getting the diagnosis is traumatic in itself. And so just hearing the words, hearing you have breast cancer, hearing you're at stage whatever you hear, that in itself causes anxiety. And so approximately 30% of breast cancer survivors experience anxiety or depression for at least 1 year or longer post-diagnosis. So if you're experiencing any of this, it's normal. It's a normal part of the process. So that's one of the questions I always get. Okay, what I'm going through or what I'm feeling, is this normal? Should I be feeling this way? Absolutely. It is all normal. What we want to make sure is that you can manage it. That's when it becomes abnormal, when it's no longer manageable. It's no longer something that you can control. It's causing you to not be able to function in your everyday life. Up to 4 years, Brown's, Hughes, there was a study, and they found 4 years post-diagnosis, approximately 25% of survivors have significant levels of anxiety. So although it decreases with each year, it's still present. And then after 20 years, there's another study that shows 5% of breast cancer survivors continue to experience psychological distress. So again, just so that you can understand that if you are experiencing it, it is normal, it's a part of the process. And now what do you do with this anxiety? How do you manage it? And a lot of the studies that I've read, it shows that personality traits, optimism, so if you're someone who's very optimistic about everything, is pretty much a good indicator to determine if you will have more positive or better outcomes as a breast cancer survivor. And so a lot of the research show that if you're someone who looks at the glass half empty versus half full, then it's more likely that you will experience a lot more distress or psychological distress during your treatment and recovery from breast cancer. Also, previous studies have found that, again, optimistic people, when you have optimism, it increases your psychological adjustment, and it also decreases anxiety and depression, and it acts as a buffer. The only thing there, the research is very limited on long term. So this is within 5 years of getting your diagnosis. That's what the research show. But there's not much research after 5 years to talk about how the distress. So more research is being done and studies are being completed to find out post 5 years, what are some predictors or indicators for psychological distress. And so again, 5 years after getting the diagnosis, 9% experience depression, whereas 26% continue to experience anxiety. And one of the major concerns is the fear of the breast cancer recurring. It influences how the survivors experience their anxiety, but not necessarily how they experience depression. So what that is telling you that regardless, there's a lot of anxiety still present with those who are surviving breast cancer. Depression may go away, decrease, but the anxiety is still present. And again, survivors who were optimistic in these studies that I've looked at were less anxious and depression 1, 3, and 5 years post cancer diagnosis. So what does that mean for you? Okay, what it means is you start looking at the glass full, half full. We know that's not that easy. So what it means is to start thinking about positive things moving forward in your future, which we'll talk about anxiety and what that means. But looking positively towards your future and not at the negative or the past. Thinking about possibilities, reality, things that are positive for you and not necessarily what has happened to you or what you've experienced it. And that experience is being a negative one, but one that how can you learn, how can you grow, and how can you do things differently? Okay, so oftentimes we think of anxiety, anxious, worrying, maybe panic attacks, sweaty, ruminating thoughts. But the foundation or the core of anxiety is fear. So I want you to understand what is fear. It is a basic automatic state of alarm consisting of perception or conclusion of imminent threat or danger to your safety and security. A thought of imminent threat or danger to one's safety. So I want you to think about that, fear. And think about maybe when you heard the diagnosis or when you've experienced something anxious or some anxiety in your life. Were you afraid of something? Was there some fear there? Most likely it was, because that is the foundation of anxiety. So what is anxiety? It's prolonged, complex emotional state that occurs when a person anticipates that some future situation, event, or circumstance may involve a personally distressing, unpredictable, and uncontrollable threat to their vital interests. More lasting experience than actual fear. It is a state of apprehension and physical arousal that causes you to believe you can't predict or potentially control aversive future events. So let me just stop here. Arella sent me an email yesterday and said we have a large amount of people who've registered. I instantly got anxious. She didn't say anything else. She didn't say, so you need to do well, you have to make sure you have this covered. She just said how many was registered. And I was like, oh my God, pressure. I got a little anxious, right? A future event that I have no control over. And what did I start predicting? I make sure I say the right thing. I hope everyone gets what they need to know. Those ruminating thoughts, I just start thinking about, oh, got to make sure I get all the answers, make sure I cover everything. I hope, this is helpful for everyone. I hope everyone, those thoughts just started running in my head. And then I thought, you're doing a training on anxiety, get it together. And then I started thinking, you'll be okay. Whatever you share, hopefully it'll be helpful. If not, they'll let you know, and you learn and you grow and you move on. And then I thought, this isn't my first time having that many people that I'm speaking in front of. So again, I started forecasting and thinking about future, what if this happens, oh my God, start having these thoughts, my stomach, all of these things start happening. Anxiety, because my true fear was, what if I don't do well? So that's an example of fear and how it relates with anxiety. So unraveling anxiety, you have to know what it is. If any of you have met with me individually, or I've met with you in a group, or this is your first time, I'll always say, if you don't know the cause, you can't make changes. If you don't know the reason you're doing what you're doing, you can't change it. So if you don't know the reason where or how you are becoming anxious and what the cause of your anxiety, you can't stop being anxious. And that is what people always do. They want to stop doing something and do something different, and they don't even know why they're doing what they're doing, or the reason, or what need it's meeting, or what it's fulfilling. And so first you have to understand the symptoms. What is anxiety? What does that look like for you? And so there are physical symptoms, cognitive symptoms, emotional and behavioral symptoms. And so, excuse me, I'm going to read off a list of them. And so if you can just think about yourself when you've experienced something anxious, which is going to be my next question, think about, at least, have you experienced any of these symptoms? And if not, maybe you can identify some others that you've experienced in each category. So from physical symptoms would be increased heart rate. So kind of having the heart palpitation, feeling like your heart is about to pop out of your chest. Shortness of breath, feeling like you can't breathe or that you're breathing very fast. Chest pain or pressure, oftentimes feeling like you're about to die. Dizziness, lightheaded, sweating, hot flashes, chills, nausea, upset stomach, diarrhea, tingling or numbness in your arms and legs, weakness, unsteadiness, faintness, tense muscles, rigidity, and maybe even dry mouth, not able to talk. So those are some of the physical symptoms that you may experience as a sign of anxiety. Now, some cognitive symptoms: fear of losing control, being able to cope, fear of physical injury or death, fear of going crazy, fear of negative evaluation of others. That was one of mine. I was like, okay, am I going to do the right thing? Is it going to be okay? My fear of that. Frightening thoughts, images, or memories, perceptions of reality or detachment. Poor concentration, unable to concentrate or have confusion or easily distracted. Narrowing of attention, hypervigilance for threats. Poor memory, difficulty in reasoning, loss of objectivity. So those are some cognitive symptoms. Then we have behavioral symptoms: avoidance of threat or cues or situation. So, for example, maybe you were at your oncologist's office or the doctor's office when you got the diagnosis, and you were sitting in a specific room, and every time you go, you don't want to go back to that room. You rather go and have your visit in another room. You're avoiding the threat or situations because that's when you heard the diagnosis. That's when you heard, oh my God, I have breast cancer. What am I going to do? So that's an example. Escape or flight, avoiding, not even wanting to go and have your chemo, or not even wanting to go and have radiation, just not participating, not being a part of the treatment. Pursuit of safety, trying to do something that makes you feel safe. For example, that's one of the challenges, that when we're anxious, we always try to avoid or do something that makes us feel better. Sometimes it's healthy, sometimes it's not. But ultimately, you're looking for safety, to feel safe, because this anxiety has you feeling so unsafe, uncomfortable, that you want to get control of that feeling. hyperventilation, freezing, motionless, difficulty speaking. So these are all behavioral symptoms that you may have experienced or have felt or seen someone who is having some anxiety. And then last, emotional symptoms, feeling nervous, tense, wound up, feeling frightened, fearful, or terrified, being edgy, jumpy, jittery, being impatient, frustrated, feel like every time you go to the doctor's office or you're sitting in the waiting room, you get frustrated, feel like it's taking forever, it's too much time. Every time I come, it's 2-3 hours. And maybe they've told you the process when you come will be the 2 to 3 hours, but it just seems like it's taking 4 or 5 hours. So these are all symptoms of an anxious person or anxiety that you may witness or you may feel or experience. And once again, it's normal to feel overwhelmed by anxiety. Remember, the goal is not to completely eliminate anxiety. Pretty much impossible. It's to be able to manage your anxiety. So, next question. Can you identify at least one symptom from each that you have experienced? Don't be shy. Or any questions about the symptoms that I've discussed? None? Oh, you're too shy.
No, but I will say yes, I could relate to something in each category. Absolutely.
Okay. No one else? Oh, you guys are too shy. Don't be nervous. Don't be anxious. Looks like we have 1, 2.
Yeah, so we're getting some comments. I experienced a few frustration and concentration. Okay, just so you know, there's no way to, yeah, we don't want anybody unmuted. We just want people to use the chat box. I'm sorry, not the chat box, the Q&A box. I'll see if I can disable the chat box, but please, yeah, list your questions or comments in the Q&A. And we do ask, please, that you do remain muted, just because it creates a lot of background noise. So thank you for that. We appreciate the comments.
Okay. All right. So as I shared with you when Aurelis told me some of the things I felt, got a little antsy, got a little, I won't say none of the physical, no dizziness and any of that, but more of the fear of, okay, am I going to do okay? Am I going to answer the questions? What if? I didn't avoid anything, and emotionally I wasn't on edge or any of that. But every time I could say there's some anxiety, maybe whenever I present, just okay, little stomach somatic things going on. But after I get to talking and kind of get a feel of the audience, then it kind of goes away. So it's not that I have to do any self-talk to myself all the time. Sometimes you may have to, sometimes you may not, which we'll talk about that later as well. Okay. So what is anxiety? Always, always future oriented. You are obsessed with the what if thinking. What if, what if? Past events do not cause anxiety. It has already happened. It is the imagination of future adverse events or catastrophes that causes anxiety. So I want to be clear. It does not cause anxiety to think about something from the past. Maybe an image, which we talked about, some of the symptoms or memories from your past that you begin to think about future adversity or future dangerous thinking and so forth that causes the anxiety. So example, what if my surgery does not go well? What if I die during my surgery? What if the treatment does not work? What if my family is not able to handle my diagnosis? What if my cancer returns Remember, that's the #1 anxiety, depressive thoughts that breast cancer survivors have that causes the most anxiety and depression is, what if my cancer returns? This is all future. So you're not anxious about actually getting the diagnosis. It's what your life will look like in the future now that you have the diagnosis. Okay? I want to make sure you're clear. Not the past, but the future. And the one thing we cannot do is predict or change the future. So we're going to talk about staying present in the now and not forecasting about the future, which then causes anxiety. These are all emotional states that causes anxiety or causes us to have an anxious mind.
Hey, Naynette. Question about the symptoms. Miss Debbie asked, can symptoms be transient? Can they come and go?
Absolutely. And at different times. So different anxious or anxiety type experiences may cause or have you experience different types of symptoms. So yes, it's not every time you're anxious, you do this, you do that. It could be when you hear about certain things, you experience these type of anxiety symptoms, and you may experience different kinds. It's possible, but overall, most of the time, people are consistent with the same anxious type symptoms. But there's times when, oh no, I didn't feel that way, but when I did this, I felt this way.
Thank you.
Okay. So what's some other facts? Anxiety, it can decrease naturally if it's left alone. And you're probably thinking like, what? I don't do anything and I still seem more anxious. And it's about, it'll increase, it can decline naturally. It's about how do you turn it, how does it turn into a persistent state? And it stays that way because of the way you think, how you feel, what are your thoughts associated? And so the way you think determines if anxiety continues or declines. So if you're thinking dangerously, you're thinking negatively, remember we talked about optimism, being optimistic as a buffer to decreasing psychological distress. It's also for anxiety and overall. If you're thinking positively and you're thinking, for example, what if my cancer returns? And so thinking positively is, okay, if it returns, I will go through the process of the treatment. And if I need to do things differently, I will. If I have to repeat the same, I'm open to whatever the experience is. That's positive thinking versus the last time it didn't work, so I'm pretty sure it's not gonna work this time. And what if they can't take they can't remove all the cancers? What if I can't have chemo this time? What if I can't have the radiation? What if the medication makes me sick? What if I die? All of these what ifs keeps your anxiety in a persistent state because of the negative thinking versus if there's positive thinking, then you're able to think positively and then naturally the anxiety will decrease. Again, and I say this all the time, easier said than done, which is why one of the keys is to practice. And if it works one time, you continue to do it with the positive thinking, not positively think something one time and then the next time go back to revert to the negative thinking or not thinking positive because then it's not working. So I'll talk about that as well as the stages. It's practice. So anxiety can greatly vary between situations and from person to person, kind of what the question you just asked, Ms. Debbie. It varies. So the problem with anxiety is that people gravitate to and overestimate both the likelihood and the intensity of threat and danger. And so ultimately, anxiety, you're thinking something dangerous, a threat to your safety, to you, or something catastrophic. That's it. Those are the three things that you're thinking about and is at the forefront. It may not necessarily come out in words unless you sit and dissect and self-reflect and kind of dive into what's happening. But ultimately, that's what's happening for you. You're thinking the worst, something negative, and typically it's thinking dangerous or thinking catastrophic. And so you often find yourself thinking that a threat or danger is very likely to happen, or do you find yourself often thinking that the worst will happen? And sometimes people will say, well, I'm actually not even thinking like that. I'm just thinking, I just can't do this. I can't do, I just, it's just overwhelming. I don't like to feel this way. And when you think about it, there's a reason you don't like to feel that way. Was it the last time you felt that way? It was scary. Or the last time you had those feelings or thoughts, something catastrophic may have happened, or you may have thought so, or something dangerous have happened, or you think that's what happened. But if you begin to think back and process what's the foundation of what's the core of this anxiety, it's most likely fear, and the fear of threats and danger or something catastrophic. And so it's often difficult to stop and recognize the anxious thinking because you're overly consumed with how bad you feel. So oftentimes you're thinking, I don't want to feel this way. I don't want to feel out of control. Remember all of the symptoms that I talked about. Those are things that you're feeling, thinking. And so you don't want to feel bad. You don't want to go through this. You don't want to have this happen. And so you're trying to escape that instead of stopping, being present, thinking about what it is that you're experiencing and how do you move forward and experience or do things differently. So again, being present is key. Any questions? Anyone?
There's not any coming in right now, but I'll keep monitoring it. I did open the chat box, I believe. So if anybody needs to make comments, you can use the chat box and then just use the Q&A for the questions, please.
Okay. So what is the anxious mind? Fear is the foundation of all anxiety states, as I've been saying. It's the underlying psychological state that motivates the anxiety. Example, you're afraid about your cancer returning. So whenever you get a call from your oncologist or surgeon, you get anxious. Whenever you have to go to the doctor, you get anxious. And ultimately, your fear is the underlying fear is your anxiety potentially about something catastrophic, ultimately, which would be something like dying. So I want you to be able to see, I'm trying to give you practical examples of how it looks to you. It could be something totally different. It could be anxiety related to working. How do you return back to work normal? How do you return back to functioning? I won't be able to. What if I don't get the job back? Or what if I'm not received at work? What if I'm not able to take off like I need to? What if I'm too tired to do the work? So all of those things could potentially cause anxiety. I just use this one as an example. But as you can see, the ultimate, the foundation is fear of something, threat, danger, or something catastrophic, at least to you. It may not necessarily be catastrophic, but to you, that's how you feel, that's how you think. And so that's what drives how you behave. And so that's what we want to look at. Thinking, feeling, changing that to ultimately change how you behave or your behaviors related to the anxious mind. So what happens in our minds? We overestimate danger. We underestimate your ability to cope, and that equals high anxiety. I'll say that again. You overestimate or exaggerate a threat or danger. You underestimate your ability to actually manage to cope, to deal with it, and it causes you to have high anxiety. Remember, as I stated earlier, the core fear of anxiety is the automatic belief that something dangerous or catastrophic will happen. That's automatically where you go, and that's what causes anxiety. Causes you to feel overwhelmed, causes you to feel out of control, causes your heart to move faster, I've had some who have out-of-body experience. They feel like they're not even in their body, sweaty hands. That's all happened because you're feeling like something is so overwhelming, the danger, that you have no control. You underestimate your ability to deal with it, and it causes you to have high anxiety. So I want to break down and be clear, thinking dangerously. And that's focusing on thoughts, images, or memories of personal threat or danger. So when there's a trigger, you automatically think dangerously. And I'm going to use an example of someone who maybe have fear of spiders. Automatically, they think about, or they have images about spiders, thinking dangerously. Okay, if I come in contact, I come near one, it's going to either kill me, attack me, I won't live. And so anytime they are in areas or in situations or see things that brings the thought of the resemblance of a spider, a spider web, they automatically become anxious because they're thinking about possibly what a spider can do, or even just to see a spider. It could be a spider on a picture. It could be a spider on TV, not necessarily a physical spider in their face, just any thoughts, memories, or about a spider is threatening to them. And so they automatically get to thinking danger, death. They feel helpless. Okay, if a spider come around, if there's spider webs, there's nothing I'm gonna do. I won't be able to escape. They won't go to places where they think spiders. You think of a house that may be old, not a new home. Okay, there's probably filled with spiders. They won't go to an attic, won't go to a basement. All of those things they're avoiding because of fear that they may be attacked or their fear of spiders. And they can't stand that feeling. It's too overwhelming. So they avoid anything associated with it. Again, they don't go certain places. They see a spider web, they won't go around it. They always constantly looking in the home, making sure there's no spiders. So they're living their lives by running from the thought, fears, memories, anything related to a spider. It's just so anxiety provoking for them. They're not thinking, okay, if I do come in contact with the spider, what can I do? Okay, I can walk around it. I could step on it. I could spray it. None of that's come to mind. Only thing come to mind is the thought of death, or the thought of the spider attacking them, or the thought of the spider trying to kill them. So that's an example of how future. You notice I never said they actually had been they've come in contact with the spider and this has happened. Didn't say that. Future thoughts or future what could happen that they will not have control over is what's causing anxiety. And some may think, well, what if you've experienced something traumatic? And so now future events, so such as someone who maybe experienced child abuse, or who have been raped or something, and there's some anxiety when they come into certain areas or think about the experience. But I want you to think about, it's a past memory or thought, but it's about their future. Because of this, or because I was abused, I won't be a good person, or I will be viewed as a negative person, or I don't have a future. It's not about the past, it's about their future, something that they don't have control over. So worrying is also common with anxiety, and it contributes to preoccupation or threat. And that's the ruminating thoughts, constantly forecasting, worrying about the what ifs, the unknowns, the fears, the things that you're either unable to change, instead of thinking about what you can change, what you do have control over, and what you can do differently. So that's also a part of having the anxious mind. Consistent worrying, consistent thinking dangerously, consistently thinking about something catastrophic causes anxiety. And let me go back to, and so when we think about thinking, I want you to think about, I didn't want this to be like a therapy session, but I want you to think about there's distorted ways of thinking. There's a whole lot of them, but a lot of them, when it comes to anxiety, you most likely see forecasting and you see catastrophe, catastrophizing everything. And so we talked about what catastrophe feeling like. I feel so hopeless, weak, vulnerable. I'm unable to cope. I can't stand this feeling. Something's bad. The worst is going to happen. Always thinking the worst and negative. Well, forecasting is another distorted thought process, of way of thinking. And it's you forecasting the future and thinking something negatively, something dangerous, or something catastrophic could potentially happen. And so that's the worrying and ruminating thoughts. So, for example, you have a surgery coming up. You begin to forecast. What if the surgery is a disaster? What if I don't make it through the surgery? What if after I get my reconstructed, one breast doesn't look the same and the other one? Again, forecasting. You have no evidence of any of this, which we'll talk about too. There's no evidence of any of that information, but you begin to forecast and begin to think and have these ruminating thoughts and worry about future events that you have no evidence, no idea that could even potentially happen. It could or could not, but it causes you anxiety. So that's another way that's a distorted thought. So forecasting as well as catastrophizing everything. Whenever you think of something, it's always to the negative. It's always the threat of danger. It's always something catastrophic. Those are the two distorted thinkings that you see a lot with those who experience anxiety. So how do we transform being anxious to normalizing or minimizing your anxiety? So anxious thoughts are focused on unlikelihood of serious threat and danger, focused on inability to cope, personal helplessness, and vulnerability. That intensifies your anxiety. We change by focusing on realistic likelihood of various outcomes and focus on ability to cope and problem solve challenging circumstances. Remember, it's not out of your control. And if it is out of your control, it's not something that you can worry about. So the worrying comes when you start thinking about or trying to control things that is out of your control. And that will minimize your anxiety. So now we're going to go through the steps of how to transform an anxious mind. So what I like for you to do, you don't have to share. If you want to, you can, but you don't have to. I'm not asking that you do that. But think about something that has happened in the last few months where you felt some brief or fairly mild anxiety or worry. And I want you to think about that experience as we go through the next steps. Is there a question?
Just somebody asked if you can go back one slide. Maybe they want to take a screenshot of it. And just as somebody mentioned earlier about Naynette, if they could get a list of the symptoms that you mentioned. So if you can send that to me, then I can email it out to everyone who's registered, and I can email as well a PDF of today's presentation for those that registered.
Okay, will do. All right.
Okay, I think we're okay to move forward. If not, Marcy, just let me know, and we can go back if we need to again.
Okay. All right. So remember, think of a time that was fairly mild, not something too anxiety provoking, because we don't want you to be overwhelmed during the training. Just something mild. And let's go through the steps of how to transform the anxious mind. So step one, you have to normalize from the start. Thinking about normalizing what has happened, what the experience is. What could that look like from a normal perspective? Not the worst, not catastrophizing, but normalizing from the very beginning. Next step is you're going to start thinking about what was your thought process when you were having those anxious feelings or when you felt anxious. What were some of your thoughts thinking? What if, what didn't happen? And what you're going to start doing is catching that, catching your automatic anxious thoughts, recognizing what they are. Remember I said you can't change the behavior till you recognize why you're doing the reason, the cause for what you're doing. And you do things because of how you think and how you feel. When you think positively, you feel good, your behaviors are positive. When you think negative, you feel bad, your behaviors are negative. So think about what was your thoughts about whatever that was causing some anxiety. And how can you begin? We're going to start talking about how to transform those thoughts. So next time you are feeling anxious, stop, which I'm going to talk about being present because that's very important. Stop and think about what is it you're thinking. like stop thinking about the future, but think about the right now. So that's catching the automatic anxious thoughts. You have to be present to know what you're thinking about, because if not, you're study forecasting or thinking about catastrophes of the future instead of what's happening right now. Then the next step is think about what evidence did you have to support those anxious feelings or the negative thoughts or the catastrophizing of those thoughts. You always want to gather evidence. I always say, and so what evidence do you have to support that? For example, if you're thinking you have a surgery coming up and it's not going to go well, maybe the reconstructive piece is not, okay, what evidence do you have? Or maybe it's the surgery is going to get canceled, or maybe the surgeon's not. Do you have any evidence to support that? Typically, you will not. All of those anxious thoughts and feelings, there's no evidence to support the catastrophe that you are potentially thinking about or what's dangerous. And then sometimes you may think you have evidence, and then when you speak it out loud, it's like, wait, I guess I don't. Maybe that doesn't make sense, or maybe I shouldn't. So I want you to gather evidence. Think about, okay, what do I have to support these feelings? And oftentimes you won't have much evidence to support that. Step 4, doing a cost benefit analysis. And you're probably thinking, oh, this is not business. But I want you to think about the cost, what's costing you and how is it benefiting you to have these anxious thoughts. Think about the price you were paying for constantly listening to your faulty thoughts and beliefs about your threat and danger. And when you think about the energy, the time, and how you're putting all of this into being negative, thinking about the worst, you realize I'm putting a lot of energy in this, and it will lessen your energy and always assuming the worst. So then you'll start thinking, okay, maybe I'm putting too much energy in this and maybe it's not worth it. Okay, all this energy I'm putting into thinking about the worst and the negative, maybe if I put some of this energy into thinking about positive, I'll have a better outlook. So doing a cost benefit analysis, thinking about all this time and energy you're avoiding certain things that you may be missing out on things in life because you're avoiding it. And after you've done the evidence, there's nothing to even support why you thinking, feeling, and avoiding these things. Then next you want to decatastrophize the fear. So confront the imagined catastrophe. So again, what's the worst thing you may have thought about? I always say that. Okay, what's the worst that can happen with these thoughts? And once you start confronting that, you realize it's not that bad. I was actually meeting with someone and they have anxiety and their fear is death. She lost her father at a young age. And so now, as an adult, any relationship, her mother, her children, everything, she's fearful that when she does not know where they are, what they're doing, that they're probably something's bad is happening to them or that they're going to die. And so I had to let her know, okay, death is real. I can't sit here and say the death is not real. But that is a part of life. And so the question I had to ask her is, do you want to continue living your life on edge and constantly worrying about something that you have no control over? I'm not saying that death is not a possibility. It absolutely is. But how do you handle it? How do you understand death in a healthy way? And for her, death really equates to abandonment, like someone has left her because she didn't get a chance to say bye to her loved one. They just unexpectedly died. So remember, I said there's always a core foundation to all of this. And so she's thinking whenever someone died, they're leaving them. And I had to explain, when someone died, that's not a conscious effort to die, especially someone who dies unexpectedly, with the exception of those who complete and commit suicide. But I had to explain to her that the person's not necessarily leaving her. It's a natural part of living. Everyone has to die. And so I don't want you all to think like, well, that is my reality as well. Look, what is she talking about? I totally hear you. I understand that is a possibility. And it is for all of us, not just you. And now that you have a chronic illness, what does that look like for you? And so it's now to start thinking, how do you live the life that you know that you want to live, instead of worrying about what could potentially happen in the future or when it's going to happen. Okay, so next,
We have one question.
go for it.
And I don't know if you want to answer it now or later, but the question is, could you talk a little bit about the difference, if any, between anxiety and trauma? For example, PTSD with breast cancer, and whether you will approach treating them differently.
Okay, so that's different. So PTSD and anxiety are two different things. Post-traumatic stress disorder, again, one of the criteria is that you've had to have experienced something traumatic, life-threatening. But people with PTSD does not necessarily have anxiety. And someone with anxiety may not necessarily experience something traumatic. For example, some people who have never flown, maybe have a fear of flying, have never flown before. So they have never experienced something traumatic, they just have a fear of flying. So two different things. There's some similarities, but there is definitely different. So you can have PTSD and never have anxiety, meet the criteria for anxiety disorder. Hypervigilance, there's things about PTSD that you'll see some of the symptoms may be similar, but anxiety, again, it doesn't necessarily mean you've experienced something traumatic. So they can be different. They can be some people who has experienced something traumatic may now be having some anxiety and having panic attacks. And then that's a part of anxiety. So there's similarities, but there's also differences. But I don't want you to think those who have one automatically have the other, or vice versa. If you have PTSD, you must have anxiety. If you have anxiety, you must have PTSD. Not true. Okay. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. If whoever asked it, if it doesn't answer your question, just let us know, and we can address it further.
Okay, so step 6 is corrective cognitive errors. Remember, I talked about the distorted thinking process. Identify your thinking errors and when you're feeling anxious. So the two that I really talked about was forecasting and catastrophizing. I want to let you know there's over 20 different distorted thinking thought processes. So there's plenty. I only talked about the two that you see a lot with anxiety. But when you're working with someone who actually has an anxiety disorder, then you definitely would identify which one of the cognitive distortions they may be experiencing and how to make changes. So if you're one who thinks about the future forecasting and begin to ruminate, and always constantly assuming the negative, then you would have to think about, again, how to stay present. Catastrophizing, okay, what's the worst case scenario? Is it actually what you're thinking? Maybe it's death, or that you'll lose something, or is it really something else? So again, identify what your thinking errors are when you are feeling anxious. Make the change. Then generate alternative perspectives. That is the key. But I tell you now, as humans, we automatically jump to 7. We don't go through steps 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We want to jump to 7 and do something different. And as you see, 7 is last, almost second to last. And then number 8 is to practice everything you did in 1 through 6. So think about alternative perspectives. Oftentimes people just, okay, I'm gonna do this differently. I'm gonna stop. I'm not gonna do this. And it might work once. It might even work twice. But as humans, we go back to what is safe and what is comfortable. And what's safe and comfortable is doing what you've been doing. And that is being anxious. So then it's not working. I can't handle this. I can't take it. I can't cope with this, because you begin to feel like you failed at something, because you can't change and stop and do things differently. And it's not that you can't. Remember, you have to understand the reason for what you're doing. Why? How does it make you feel? And then identify those things to then do something different. And so once you've done that, then you start generating alternative perspectives, thinking about a positive alternative perspective to your anxious problem or concern. So again, future sir, you having a surgery. What's a positive thing? Everything will go well, and I will begin my journey of recovery, whatever that looks like. And then I'll return to whatever it is that I need and would like to return to doing. Remember, not what you should be doing, but what you would like to, what you need to, and what you can return to doing. Because that's another one. We should, and should again equates to if you can't, you're a failure. And then that equates again to negative thinking. So you want to think about what is it that you can do differently. It's reasonable, plausible, something that's that you're able to do, and not what others may think you should be doing. Doctors, family, friends, not what they think you should be doing, but what you think is an alternative that's positive and can help you transform your anxious mind. And then finally, as I said, practice the normalization part. So practicing these whole steps. Whenever you're feeling anxious, go through the steps and practice doing something different each time until it becomes a habit. And that takes about 28 days to consistently do something. So if you do it today and you don't do it again for another 2 weeks, that's not your 28 days. You got to do that same thing at least 28. So you want to practice doing things differently and looking at it from a positive, realistic perspective in order to begin to change. If not, you'll revert and go back to the anxious mind, the anxiety feelings, and then feel like you're really not able because you tried to do something different, it didn't work, and now look at you. And so you don't want to go back to that. Each time you want to think of a positive alternative, and the alternative that you came up last time may not necessarily work the next time. And that again requires you to stay focused in the present, to understand what you need at that present time to think and do things differently. It may work again the same thing, and it may not, but you want to be open to doing whatever it takes, whether it's the same thing or something different, but to make sure it's a positive and not a negative. And then I want to just go over some coping strategies to address anxiety. So we think about coping strategies and we think, here's some negative ones. I'm just going to put them out here. Escaping, avoiding are the most common. So if this is what you do, it's what you do, but it's the most common and it's the most unhealthy. Avoiding does not equate to it's okay now. Because you just avoided it, it's still going to be there. You just avoided it this time. Some other things is people go to drugs and alcohol. They become critical of themselves and begin to engage in negative self-talk. And some even become aggressive and violent. So these are there's probably other unhealthy coping strategies, but I just want to put these out here. The ones that I see the most are the top three. I don't always see aggressive or violent behaviors, but I always, most often, if you even think about the one incident you thought about for the steps, think about, did you escape or try to avoid it? Did you begin to think negatively or critical about yourself? Did you decide, you know what, I'm not going to think about that, I'm just going to have a glass of wine? You did the top two. You avoided, you escaped, then you had a glass of wine. So although it seems like, okay, it helped at the moment, it doesn't address the anxious feelings, anxious mind, because when that thought or when it comes again, you're just going to either go back to escaping and avoiding. And then here's some healthy ones. As you notice, this list is a lot longer. So mindfulness, exercise, yoga, walking. I know Turning Point PTs are big proponents for walking. It just is something about getting your body out, getting you walking, moving, seeing, you can even do it on a treadmill, but walking and getting out. Some other things I've seen clients do to help them to get present is doing some adult coloring. I know when it was first brought to me, I was like, what? But then I tried it and they actually like it. So just being present, doing something different, generating, firing different neurons in the brain. So that's one thing you can do. There's relaxation techniques, deep breathing, visual relaxation, thinking of positive times, positive moments, positive memories, deep breathing, exercising, sitting down, meditating, those type of things. And again, staying present. And if you remember, cognitive distortion, anxiety is about future. If you stay present, it helps to decrease the anxious mind. Because if you're present in what's happening, you're not thinking about what can happen in the future. You're then taking on and being and experiencing what is happening right now. And what is happening right now is not all the things you're thinking about for the future. Okay? And then there's self-help type exercises. And when you engage in self-help, I mean, you could do a workbook for yourself. You could be a part of different activities. And with those, you want to make sure you clearly understand what you're doing. Again, doing a cost benefit review. You clearly understand the purpose, the goal, and what you plan to gain out of any of these self-help type exercises. And you want to gradually take steps to move to the next. Like we went through the steps of transforming the mind. You want to gradually take steps to do things differently. You want to keep a record of what has worked for you, what has not worked for you. And again, practice, 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 practice. That's the biggest thing with anything you're doing differently. You have to practice. Sometimes it'll work better one time than the next time, and then you learn from that. If you're recording, documenting, writing down, possibly even journaling, then you understand what has worked for you, what you need to do differently, what was your thought processing when it didn't work, how could you change, what were you feeling at the time, was there some other external factors that may have impacted how you were thinking or feeling. So you want to keep a record, practice, and then evaluate. That's all a part of evaluating and problem solving. Going back to look at what it is that you're doing, seeing if you can do anything different, and making any changes that are necessary. We are all evolving, we're all human. As long as you stay present, then there's possibilities to make changes and to do things different. The minute you start thinking and forecasting and thinking about the future, which you have no control over, you cannot plan. Even when you try to plan something, things can change and it can be different. So you really, truly have no control. And so being present in what's happening in the right now allows you to then be ready for whatever happens in the future. And then last, I'm going to promote and support. Turning Point has support groups. And so we've decided to change the names. And so After the Storm is for those who are stages 0 to 3. But we changed it to Heart Connections. And again, we meet every fourth Wednesday of the month at 6 p.m. It is virtual. It is a Zoom. So if you're interested, please email myself or Sandy Moody to get your name on the list, and we will send out the Zoom link the week of. This week, yeah, this is June. Boy, isn't this summer going by fast. Because the fourth Sunday, the fourth Wednesday is next Wednesday. We're talking about self-care. What does it look like during and after the pandemic? And then we also changed our Coffee and Conversations group, and it's now the NBC Connections. And it's a support group for metastatic breast cancer survivors. And again, sharing experience, information, and resources about those affected with breast cancer. The same fourth Wednesday, except it's at 10 a.m. And I was talking to the PT and everyone, and I just want you all to know, this is a support group. This is not a therapy group. So I will not ask you what's your deep thought feelings and you have to sit and share. You are sharing what you like to share, and you are learning what others are trying to share. And it's just me there facilitating, maybe giving topics for you to share about. But this is your opportunity for you all to support each other with me as a facilitator. It is not therapy. It is not group therapy. Some of you may be thinking, well, I don't want to get in front of the group. I don't know. But you learn so much about others' experience and how to help with your own experience and some things you may, and some of your experiences, you can help others. Provide resources. I've seen Some patients come in who is new at the process, other was in the middle stage, and some at the end. And to see and watch them help others through the process, those who just started gave them hope. Those who are in the middle and see those who come to the end, there's hope. So it's rewarding for all who participate, but I just want to let you know it is a support group where we all support each other, and it's not there. All right, and then last, if you could just share, how do you plan to transform your anxious mind? What are you planning to do after this training? What did you learn? Oh no.
I don't have any comments in the chat box or the Q&A, but I did want to say I appreciated the cost analysis. I thought that was a good suggestion there that we can all use in different aspects of life. Susan made a great comment. Susan mentioned focusing on the present.
Very hard to do. Very hard. That's one of the most challenging in this process, is staying present.
Diane mentioned change my catastrophe thinking.
Yes. Again, easier said than done, which is why a part of the process is to practice. Practice, stop, think, get present, and then practice doing something different, thinking positively.
Absolutely. I think that's it. I'm not seeing any other comments in the box.
Any other questions, comments, maybe that I didn't cover enough, or you like more information? Guys, don't be so shy.
Like, it's 12 o'clock. We're hungry.
I can't see you.
I think that may be it, Naynette. Oh, let's see. A comment was made that they thought your point about understanding exactly what it is that they're afraid of was very helpful. Thank you for this presentation.
You're welcome. Good.
Thank you for the feedback.
Yes, thank you.
You nailed it, Naynette. Thank you. That's one of the comments.
Thank you.
We appreciate it.
I appreciate it.
All right.
All right.
Do you have anything else on your slide? I don't want to cut your slide short.
That's it. Here's my references, and this is it.
All right. I think if you click it one more time, the little PayPal.
Oh, there.
I love that little thing. But anyways, we want to say thank you. Let's one more question or comment. Oh, thank you, Susan. Thank you so much. The information was very helpful. Thank you for the support. Susan is always supporting us, and we appreciate it.
Thank you.
So just briefly, because it's a little bit after 12, as always, Turning Point is committed to supporting the recovery of breast cancer patients through survivorship education. We really want to promote these events and make sure that we're bringing topics that matter to you. So please take a few minutes to, when you get the survey, just to answer a few questions and give us your honest feedback. As always, if you want to express your appreciation through donations, we are eternally grateful. We're now accepting donations through PayPal, which is a quick, easy way to donate. And another way that you can help us is just telling others about Turning Point. Just let other men and women know that we are here to help. If they ever need our services, we are here to help them. So we appreciate your time today. Please be on the lookout later today for this recording to be on our YouTube and Facebook page. And we appreciate your support. Have a wonderful day.